A couple of quotes from William Stafford's pithy little book, a very good book in general, on John Stuart Mill. And these quotes are about John Stuart Mill and his relationship with conservatives during his time and afterwards. So the passage I want to read start from here. Mill's capacity to irritate. Mill's capacity to irritate conservatives. Now, one thing I wanted to note here is that conservatism, specifically conservatism, is a relative term in the sense that its meaning changes in time. So conservatives in Mill's time might have been totally different from, or very different from, if not totally different from, conservatives today. So today's conservatives might be more liberals than liberals of the past in certain aspect. In any case, this divide between conservatives and liberals is a divide within modernity. It's not as if conservatives are, sometimes it's used in that way, but conservatives, we shouldn't think of conservatives as rejecting modernity or rejecting mainstream Western thinking of the time. So most of the debates between conservatives and liberals are the debates about the details of the issues, and most of their differences are within an overall agreement, maybe 80% agreement, etc. So we should keep this in mind. Mill's capacity to irritate conservatives has not diminished with time. Okay. Now, conservatives, a conservative might criticize, even if he or she is an academic, a liberal for various reasons. Might be personal, dislike of liberalism, or it might be because of certain policy issues, certain policy preferences going on at the time. So it can be, based on mostly very contingent reasons, not the reasons of principles, but it can be because of the reasons of principles as well. But we need to always differentiate between the differences which are because of the principles and differences which are because of the contingent reasons. And even within principle, the differences are mostly always about emphasis rather than major disagreements. Anyway, Mill's capacity, and Mill himself was hugely influenced by conservatives like Tocqueville and romantics, etc. So it's not as if Mill's liberalism is totally a negation of conservatism. And every liberal is a conservative in a certain sense, because he wants to conserve the hegemony of the system, which is, in part a liberal system. So Mill's capacity to irritate conservatives has not diminished with time. In 1963, his doctrine of liberty was liberty or freedom. He he wrote this little book on liberty, which is one of his major books nowadays, which has, stood the test of the time. So most of major works which Mill wrote in his heydays, or for which he was famous during his life and afterwards, like his works on political economy and his work on logic, they are mostly, become either irrelevant or very of minor interest. But his little book on liberty, that's still a major work in political philosophy. And if we read Mill today, probably it's because of, that work. So at some point we should read some of that, small book. So in 1963, his doctrine of liberty was subjected to a vicious attack by Maurice Cowling. So that was way after Mill's death. Mill died Mill was born in 1806 and he died in 1873. So almost more than half a century after. So Cowling is contended that Mill was a hypocritical liberal. The freedom he believed in was not a freedom for everyone. Okay. And as we said, whenever we talk about freedom, it has two aspects: freedom from and freedom to. So freedom is always freedom from and freedom to. So there are different types of freedom, but interrelated. So freedom from is you try to overcome any external or even internal constraint on freedom. And that clears the space for you to exercise your freedom. So often people call this negative freedom and call this positive freedom. Now, this objection that Mill was hypocritical liberal, the freedom he believed in was not freedom for everyone. So one might have asked Cowley, does he the freedom he believes in is for everyone? The thing is, freedom requires resources. So even if freedom is for everyone, actually those who exercise and enjoy freedom are those people who have resources. And obviously rich people have more resources, so they can enjoy their freedom. And poor people, even if they have formal freedom, what are they going to do with that freedom if they don't have resources? So that's the main thing. And also, I don't know what I was going to say, so it will come to me again. So freedom he believed in was not freedom for everyone, only freedom for people like himself. Well, another aspect of freedom is that, and that's a debate within those who believe in freedom. So obviously Cowley believes in freedom too, and so does Cowling, and also Mill. But the thing is, then your conception of freedom can be, different. There can be different as to what freedom is and what it requires. And so one of the point of contentions between modernists, whether they are liberal or conservative, is what does our freedom consist in? So for example, a lot of modernists at least, Kant and Mill to a certain extent as well believe that freedom is closely related to reason. So freedom means our reason is free. And what actually positive freedom means is that we should follow the dictates of reason. Only then we are truly free. On the other hand, other people think that, our freedom consists in desires. And reason is just a tool of our desires. So that's a major debate. And then obviously the question arises whether reason is anything substantially above desires or what, and all that, which, when we look at Kant's and Mill's philosophy, these are major debates. Anyway, so Cowling contending that Mill was hypocritical liberal. So not necessarily, because people like himself, so Mill for left-wing atheistic intellectuals, and by left-wing he just means that he's a social democrat or some sort of socialist, and he didn't believe in God. But that doesn't mean that he didn't see any use in religion or romanticism. His leaning toward romanticism, especially after his crisis, indicates that he wasn't totally anti-religious in the Western sense anyway. So the charge of hypocrisy stems because for Mill, if you don't develop your reason, if you're not educated, then you are not going to be free. So in that sense, freedom requires education and development of your reason. So if you are rational, then you have more right to freedom in that sense. So that's not hypocrisy as such. It is what he considers to be the requirement of the practice of freedoms. And for example, he also limits democracy for the same reasons. So I'm not justifying obviously Mill. I don't even believe in freedom in that sense as a moral value. So what I mean is, you can't just call him hypocritical because you don't understand, because he puts limits on freedom, etc. He was perfectly happy for the state or for society to interfere with those who did not measure up to his own standard. So that's why this huge myth is that freedom means you can do whatever you want. That's not what freedom means. And there's a myth that liberals actually believe in the non-interference of the state. They do believe in non-interference of the state, but only to the extent that it is harmful to the work of freedom and liberty and capital. But a state is an important tool of making people free, educating people so that they can want freedom. And a state has to interfere with the life of people to make them free. So education is one tool of that. So education is interference, especially compulsory primary and secondary and education. That is interference, and all conservatives and liberals believe in that sort of interference because they think that that's how you grow your rationality and that's how you become capable of. So that's not hypocrisy. That stems from their understanding of what freedom is. And people who think that it is hypocrisy, they don't, a lot of Muslims think that as well. They don't understand what freedom actually is, because freedom is not what allowing people to do whatever they want. Because so the state is very important, liberals as well as conservative. Because modern civilization cannot exist without this state. And this state makes sure that people want freedom. So oblige people or force people to be free, in a sense, as Hegel said. How does state does that? Through a lot of means. State does through laws, education, through socialization and social campaigns, creating institutions. And all these inculcate certain belief in freedom. Belief in freedoms. So freedom, people are not naturally free. People don't naturally desire freedom in the modern sense of the word. They are disciplined to want freedom by state and its institutions and the process of socialization, education, newspapers, television, and all those tools of information, education, and socialization are important for making people free. And a state interferes when people refuse freedom, for example, or they refuse disciplines of freedom. For example, education. So army, barracks, and prisons were important in that sense as well. And colonial disciplines, etc., and the social discipline through medical practices, through police, and all that is very important for making people free, in the sense of making people desire freedom, and and inculcating in them the requirements of what it is to be free. And one of the most important thing in that is that freedom requires self-discipline and subjection to certain discipline, certain education, cultivating your qualities, your abilities. And the theory is because you can only be free if your mind is free from superstitions and illusions, etc. And obviously the definition of superstition and illusion always changing. And more importantly, it is important for freedom to be resourceful, and you can't be resourceful unless there is a hegemony of capital, and because capital is a way to overcome scarcity and create abundance, because abundance is important to create a free society. That's a society which can exercise its positive freedom. And this capitalism and its requirements and its working cannot function without the positive intervention of the state. So when Mill and others limits people's freedom, they can be hypocritical as well, but there can be positive reasons which are delineated in liberal theory as well as conservative theory of limiting people's freedom, not only negatively but positively, and disciplining them, and so that they can not only be free but desire freedom and realize the requirements of freedom, which is to work hard, to develop their capacities, to subject themselves to the disciplines of the work, etc. So especially these things are important, these disciplines are important when society is becoming free, becoming capitalist society, because free society is a capitalist society in a way. And those disciplines can be loosened, so can be done away with to the extent that society actually inculcate or internalize those disciplines. So then so in proportion to how self-disciplined you are, you don't need to be disciplined from outside. So a lot of disciplines, especially education and socialization and propaganda, its purpose is to make you discipline yourself. So turn the need, so minimize the need for discipline from outside by creating a population which can discipline itself. Anyway, I didn't want to be that go into that much detail, but it's just so Mill. He was perfectly happy for the state of a society to interfere with those who did not measure up to his own standard. Mill was a proselytizer of genius, the relentless denigrator of existing positions, the systematic propagator of new moral posture, man of snares, smears, and pervading certainty. At about the same time, a similar case was made with a similar rudeness by Letwin, who depicted Mill as a stage on a downward slope leading from the 18th century sanity and conservatism of David Hume. See, David Hume is not conservative. So it's all so relative. Wasn't he atheist as well? Or at least very near atheist. David Hume to the Fabian socialism and collectivism of Beatrice Webb. I think what this Letwin is arguing against is social democracy or welfare liberalism. So he's not against liberalism as such, but he's probably against welfare liberalism. Mill went astray by following alien, especially German influence, even though he did not properly understand German romantics. Well, he was. What about English romantics? and really, the first influence of external influence on Mill, if there were French, French sociology and French conservatism as well, Tocqueville and all. Anyway, he represents the evil of rationalism in politics. Yeah, so that's the rationalism. Being an intolerant. So rationalist person can be intolerant because you think that you know the reality. So you and others don't because they are not rational. Elitists, liberalism is elitist and can be Puritan perfectionist, a sham liberal. No, a sham liberal. You can call him sham liberal only if you think that liberalism means you can do whatever you want, so, but that would be a very poor understanding of liberalism. Who wanted the government to impose what he considered the good life on all his fellow. Yes, a lot of liberal wants that. And a lot of conservative want that too, isn't it? Cowling's and Letwin's attacks, hostile and ideologically motivated though they were, gained purchase because there is a real problem of interpretation. And I already discussed some of it, which must be discussed later. To what extent did Mill qualify his doctrine of liberty? It's not qualification as such, because liberty historically understood means certain things which are very specific. And liberalism doesn't mean authority, it excludes authority. Liberalism means the authority of reason or rationality, or those people who are rational, and that one. And second, liberalism also means, since you need resources, so liberalism recognizes that, so in such a society there would be natural authority of those who can accumulate resources, and you would have to follow the dictate of those, because presumably you need to follow them in order to actually be really free. So these qualifications are not necessarily external qualification. Anyway, to what extent did Mill qualify his doctrine of liberty with an advocacy of authority and of collective action for the good of the whole? Anyway, I think these were interesting passages and interesting criticisms of Mill. Hopefully we learned something from it. Okay, let's